Hi, my name's Ajit. I'm a climate journalist working in Germany, and I graduated as a civil engineer in 2017, so just 3 years ago. And today I just want to briefly talk you through how I got here and how civil engineering's helping me kind of on a day-to-day basis with what I do, even though journalism is very, very different to what I studied. I cover the environment, and the main task within that is to research stories, to interview experts, and to then kind of communicate the findings, which normally means writing an article in English, but that can include going on TV to talk about it in the TV studio, or speaking to colleagues in the radio desks, or making videos, which is another big part of what we do. So going out and filming or presenting or kind of editing videos together that are then seen on our Facebook channels or other social media channels. Um, And so that is a core element of what we do. It's finding out something new about the world, communicating those findings in a way that's easy to understand so that everyone can share in that knowledge. That's allowed me to do some incredibly cool projects. So we've investigated how African megacities are adapting to climate change as they're urbanizing at ridiculously fast rates. A colleague and I went undercover and filmed at a reptile trade fair after we found endangered species for sale in Facebook groups that were then going to be passed on in person at one of these fairs. Um, and also covered a lot of the scientific reports, the new science, the latest kind of groundbreaking science from the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, um, and putting that in context and kind of saying, what does that mean kind of for people's everyday lives? So it's an incredibly cool job. It's one that I'm very lucky to have, and I genuinely really do enjoy what I do. Um, it was a weird step to move away from civil engineering, but it's one that I think the degree has definitely helped me with and continues to help me. So just to kind of outline how I got there, I wasn't a particularly engaged civil engineering student. I think in my first couple of years I didn't turn up to lectures, definitely not as much as I should have. And I kind of had chosen to study it because I was good at maths. Not good enough to actually study maths or physics or anything like that, but kind of decent at maths and had an interest in kind of something a bit more practical and applied. Which I guess might be that was the experience for a lot of people in my year group. I imagine it's similar for yours. And with some element of kind of wanting to do something a bit constructive that kind of helped society in some way. And you hear these stories about how, I mean, one really convincing one for me is that civil engineers save more lives than doctors, because giving people access to clean water and sanitation has been one of the biggest things in the last century that's really made lives across the world much better. So you hear things like that, and that really inspired me, certainly as a teenager. And it was a natural thing to study, and Bristol was a cool city to live in and to study it in. I think I was not so interested in kind of the technical details. I think after a little while I was kind of more interested in the bigger picture and kind of the societal impacts of what was happening, and didn't really have the patience to actually go through the mechanics and the maths that you need to actually really be able to contribute to solving the problems. So I wasn't super engaged, and when I did a year abroad, I was studying out in Austria. That would have been in 2014, 2015. And so I'd done German at school, and I'd taken it as an open unit for the first couple of years, and I really loved learning German. And I basically couldn't complete the year. It was too difficult. I was failing a lot of courses, which was kind of normal for their system in Austria. Um, and it was civil engineering taught in German, and the German they speak in Austria is very different to the German they speak in Germany. So it was understandable that it was difficult, but I realized I wasn't going to finish it, and so I asked if I could retake the year or if I could stay out there and just come back afterwards. And so that happened. I did the first semester and cancelled, and then didn't do the second semester. But I stayed out there. I did some freelance writing. I started writing for The Guardian, they had a cities section. And so, I mean, I did that for maybe 6 months whilst I was living out in Austria. I learned German really well. And I came back and moved down into the year group below, and I resat my third year and stayed on for the masters. In that time, I was pretty sure I wanted to be a journalist. I was doing a lot of writing, I was reading a lot. I had applied for lots of internships and applied for lots of graduate jobs, none of which I got. And then toward the end of my time in Bristol, I applied for a traineeship in Germany with Deutsche Welle, which is a German broadcaster, and I got it and moved out here in September of 2017, and I've stayed here since. First I was living in Bonn, now I've moved to Berlin. And for the last year and a half, I've basically just been covering environment and climate. And so, I mean, kind of the key point of all of this is, how does civil engineering help me? The answer is really in so many ways that you would never expect. I mean, so the obvious one is that being able to be good at maths and being able to kind of just being numerate is in itself puts you ahead of a lot of journalists. And it's an important part of the job, a lot of the stuff, to be able to kind of put things in context, to work out how important a step is or an event is. Having the math skills to be able to analyze that, and also the communication skills to be able to convey that, is something that, I mean, I guess a lot of people are told that they can do one or the other. And I think it's just important to remember that that's really not true. You can do both, you can learn both, and journalists can learn how to be good at maths, and civil engineers can learn how to write, and there isn't any inherent contradiction between those two things. Kind of on a more sort of, I mean, you're going to spend 4 years or 3 or 4 years studying this, so kind of on a more practical level, I would say that learning how to read an academic paper and to evaluate it and read it critically and put it in the context of other academic papers, I think that level of understanding is something that you really can only have, to some degree, can only have drilled into you by studying one topic for several years. And then there's all kind of on a more abstract level, one thing that I find really helps is this ability to not necessarily need a definitive theoretical answer, which maybe kind of the maths students might be more inclined to approach problems in that way. I mean, the degree you do is very practical, you learn a lot of problem solving skills, and you also learn the limitations. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're going to build something, you can't wait to know every single factor. There will be uncertainties in everything that you've measured, and you don't have definitive theoretical answers. You don't just derive something or work out from first principles and then have the answer, the golden truth. In practice, journalism is very similar to that. You do not have time to kind of research something so thoroughly that you do have the final answer. But it's a question of how close can you get to the truth given the resources you've got at your disposal. So just to kind of wrap that up, the main things that I think I learned from my civil engineering degree that kind of still help me today is pretty much how to be numerate. It's pretty much to be numerate, to code, to be able to kind of look at problems critically and kind of assess different pieces of information. And one thing which I didn't actually mention, but kind of is obviously incredibly important, is teamwork. I think it's something that really cannot be valued enough, and you get to do much more of it in this degree program than you do in a lot of other subjects. So you do have experience working on projects, managing projects, and I think that really is very, very valuable. And yeah, so just final bit of advice would be to read up as much as you can around the topic. It's something I regret doing. It's something I really wish I'd done more of when I was at Bristol, because it makes what you're learning so much more interesting. If you're having to do tutorial sheets learning how to actually solve the problem, if you've read up personal stories of people who are affected by this problem, then it really changes how you see it. It stops it from being this abstract kind of like homework type question, and suddenly it becomes very real with people whose lives are actually being affected by this, and where you're learning how to do something in order to improve their lives. Another thing that I'd add is that if you've got the chance to take language units or to learn language, then definitely do so. It's something I found really fulfilling and has helped me in so many ways. And if you're able to grasp engineering concepts, you can definitely learn a new language. It's not something super difficult. There's no real barrier to doing so. And yeah, finally, just very last thing would be to make most of living in Bristol, because it is a very engaged city, much more so than a lot of other places in the UK. And there is a lot going on that you can get involved with, and I think will help kind of shape your perspectives on maybe some of the social issues surrounding engineering. I mean, there's a lot of issues around, say, housing and the right to housing and access to housing, and changes in who's living where Bristol is kind of undergoing a lot of kind of social issues that as civil engineers we don't often consider. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that there's a lot of value in kind of looking into the social side of engineering and not limiting yourself to just the technical side of it. And I think that's something that Bristol is good at doing, and the uni is good at teaching that. So yeah, I hope that was helpful. Please feel free to get in touch with any questions, or if you want any career advice or anything. Yeah, always happy to hear from people. So yeah, thanks for listening and best of luck.